My biological mother, who had never raised me for a single day, heard that I had inherited my adoptive father's tens of billions of inheritance. She immediately brought my twin sister to seek refuge with me. It would have been okay if she had just tried to morally kidnap me, but she ate my food, wore my clothes, used my things, and even tried to find someone to rape me. To protect myself, I smashed the rapist to death. It was clearly self-defense, but they framed me together, causing me to be wrongly sentenced to death in prison. If I could live my life again, I would definitely make sure they stayed in prison for the rest of their lives. I was reincarnated at the 18th birthday party of my twin sister Stella. All students from Xinghua High School could enter the best hotel in Rongqing with their student ID cards and enjoy the delicious food at Stella's birthday banquet. Stella was wearing a gorgeous haute couture dress, standing in the middle of the stage like the moon surrounded by stars, enjoying everyone's flattery. Even my boyfriend Ethan was standing beside her with a tender look on his face, asking her about her well-being. She looked at me from afar and gave me a provocative look. I was just about to fight back when someone grabbed my arm and yanked me hard. My mother frowned tightly, and her tone was full of impatience. "What are you doing here? Today is your sister's birthday party. Haven't you had enough of being a rich girl for so many years? Do you have to come and steal your sister's limelight? How could you be so vicious?" She dragged me while walking towards the outside of the banquet hall. In my previous life, I kept explaining to her that I just came to pay the bill, but she didn't care. She just warned me not to ruin my sister's coming-of-age ceremony. Now, I watched her swaying back as she walked away in her haute couture cheongsam after throwing me at the entrance of the banquet hall. I sighed that money was really a good thing. Not long ago, she and Stella were just shabby beggars. In just 3 months, they had learned the extravagance and dissipation of the rich thoroughly. But it seemed that they had forgotten that all luxurious enjoyment needed to be paid for. And I would never be the licking dog who endured their ridicule and sarcasm and was still willing to pay the bill for them. Zachary, the president of the Zachary family, passed away due to illness 3 months ago, and all his property was left to his adopted daughter Wendy. This report was everywhere, and my photo appeared on the headlines of various news. In less than 2 days, my biological mother came to claim kinship with me by virtue of my face that was exactly the same as my twin sister's. "Mom has finally found you." She probably hadn't taken a bath for a year. I didn't dislike the stinking hug that made my eyes water. I thought that I could also have a mother's love like ordinary people. My adoptive father was extremely busy, and sometimes I couldn't even see him once a year. He also had extremely high requirements for me. I hardly had a childhood, and my life was filled with all kinds of courses. I was grateful to him for giving me a prosperous life and various learning resources. But I also envied those children who were loved by their parents. So when my mother showed up, I had the expectation of being loved. I cared about her and gave her whatever she wanted. The 2 people who were originally timid soon adapted to the life of the rich and powerful. The sentence my mother Fiona said the most was, "You've enjoyed it alone for so many years. And you just let us wander outside and suffer. Doesn't your conscience hurt?" I sent my sister Stella to the same high school as mine. She even regarded herself as a down-and-out princess who had returned to the rich and powerful family. She loved to cry to my boyfriend Ethan about the grievances she had suffered over the years. With just a few words, she coaxed Ethan into feeling sorry for her and repeatedly warned me to compensate my sister well. My forbearance and concession didn't win anyone's pity. When I was confirmed to be recommended to Harvard, Stella said that she wanted to exchange identities with me and go to Harvard to study instead of me. That was the first time I refused her. She cried, and my mother got angry. She shouted at me loudly and ordered me to kneel down. "You owe us so much over the years. What's wrong with your sister just asking for a recommended place? You can repeat a year of study and take the exam again next year. Why did I give birth to such an ungrateful wretch like you? I should have drowned you when you were born." At that time, I didn't take this sentence to heart. Now that I think about it, there might be something hidden about my getting lost when I was a child. I insisted on not exchanging identities with Stella, and the two of them ignored me for many days because of this. Later, Stella said that she wanted to make peace with me and invited me to a hotel. I went there without any precautions and was knocked unconscious by someone with a stick. When I woke up again, a strange man was about to tear off my clothes, and a camera was set up at the end of the bed. I struggled hard and hit the man on the head with the water glass on the bedside table. Blood gushed out, and the man died on the spot. I huddled in the corner, shivering. My mother and sister arrived in time. I looked at them for help. My sister fiddled with the camera and nodded to my mother with an ugly expression on her face. My mother called the police. After the police came, I thought I was safe. But my mother pointed at me and said, "She is the murderer." Later, I learned that my sister had deleted the first half of the video in the camera, and the second half only recorded how I smashed the man's head. In court, my mother sacrificed family loyalty for righteousness and accused me sadly of not having the courage to take responsibility for what I had done. My sister even put the evidence of my killing in front of the judge, saying that I was in a romantic relationship with that man I had never met before. I was sentenced to death. Before I died, they came to see me. Stella was extremely satisfied with my down-and-out appearance. "You've finally become what my mother and I used to be. Since we're family, you should naturally taste the bitterness we've suffered." My mother didn't say much. With just a look, Stella held me down. She grabbed my right hand and suddenly bit my finger hard. My screams attracted the prison guards. My mother quickly put my hand on the wool she had prepared, leaving a bright red fingerprint, and then quickly packed up her things and left. It didn't matter if they wanted all my property. They also wanted me to die. I couldn't rest in peace even after death. I went back to the villa and told the security guards not to let my mother and Stella in again. I originally wanted to ask someone to pack up their things and throw them at the door, but then I remembered that they had come empty-handed, and they should leave cleanly now. I curled up in bed. The despair and helplessness of my previous life still made my spine tingle, and I couldn't recover for a long time. My cell phone kept ringing. I blocked Stella and Fiona. Videos of Stella's embarrassment were spread in various groups. Under the spotlight, she used to be like a princess until the waiter handed her the sky-high bill. She dialed my phone in a panic. After being hung up, she anxiously called for her mother. The mother and daughter were like ants on a hot pan, running around in a hurry. They probably hadn't been so embarrassed for a long time. The classmates picked up their mobile phones one after another to record this dramatic scene. After all, since entering this school, Stella's luxurious lifestyle in terms of food, clothing, and daily use was astonishing. I had given her enough pomp and face, but instead of being grateful, she became extremely conceited. Now that she had fallen from grace, many people were happy to watch the show. Except for Ethan, the Phoenix man who was always sympathetic to the fair sex. My cell phone kept ringing, and every message was from him. "Wendy, where are you? Stella is almost crying with anxiety. Hurry up and come to pay the bill. If you don't show up within 5 minutes, don't ever appear in front of me again. Are you doing this on purpose? Can't you bear to see Stella doing well? You've made her suffer for so many years. How much more do you want to push her?" Seeing these disgusting messages, I felt as uncomfortable as if I had swallowed a fly. Ethan was my first love. He was outstanding and handsome. He never worried about his humble origins and was always hardworking and progressive. In my previous life, I loved him hopelessly. His parents couldn't afford his tuition fees, so I paid them. They couldn't give him living expenses, so I provided them. I took care of his self-esteem, and all the money was given to him in the name of a scholarship. But later, in order to protect my pitiful sister, he identified me in court together with them. He said that I was in a relationship with that rapist. The look in his eyes when he looked at me was cold and heartless, without the slightest bit of guilt. He pointed at me as if he were a beam of just light and said to the judge firmly, "This woman has always been promiscuous in her private life. She's always seducing men and has repeatedly pestered me. When I didn't agree to her, she threatened and intimidated me in various ways. You mustn't let such a harmful person go. She killed someone and she must pay with her life. Thinking of this, I clenched my fists tightly, and the veins on my hands bulged. Ethan, let's break up. I sent these words tremblingly and also blocked him. I took a deep breath. The punishment had just begun. 2 hours later, I watched the videos in the group. Since Fiona and Stella really couldn't get in touch with me and the hotel refused to let them leave, they had no choice but to take off all the accessories and dresses on them, and just managed to pay for the meal. After a while, the security guard Jack came to tell me out of breath that Fiona was shouting abuse outside the door with Stella and that they couldn't handle it. I saw that his face was full of scratches and his clothes were torn. I felt very sorry. Just call the police. I'll add 2,000 to your bonus this month. Jack's tightly furrowed brows immediately relaxed, and his gloomy look disappeared. He thanked me repeatedly and went out happily. The security guard could be so happy and grateful for 2,000 yuan. But I had given Fiona 10 or even 100 times more money, yet I couldn't get a smile from her. She said that I owed her and my sister because I didn't bring them to enjoy a good life earlier, which made them suffer so much in the previous years. No matter how much they made a scene at the door, I didn't go out to look at them. Soon I heard the sound of sirens. The security guard had an injury assessment done. Fiona and Stella, who had just come of age, were detained. I had a high fever and vaguely dreamed about the day when I was wrongly sentenced to death in prison in my previous life. 3 days later, I returned to school. As soon as I walked into the classroom, I found that Ethan was accusing the head teacher, Teacher Claire, of being a coward with a righteous look on his face. As a teacher, how can you compromise for money? You should set a good example for the students and dare to fight against evil forces. Aren't you afraid of hurting the students' hearts by doing this? Teacher Claire's face was full of hesitation. The words were on the tip of his tongue, but he swallowed them back. As soon as he saw me, it was as if he had grasped a life-saving straw. Wendy, come to my office. I nodded and followed Teacher Claire to the office. Ethan was still shouting behind us. Teacher Claire, think about it carefully. You're almost retired. Is it worth ruining your reputation for a lifetime? When we arrived at the office, Teacher Claire told me the whole story. Yesterday was supposed to be the day to distribute scholarships. But Ethan's scholarship was actually my financial support for him. I stopped it on the day we broke up. Since Ethan didn't receive the money, he came to ask Teacher Claire about it. Teacher Claire knew about this matter, but I had repeatedly told him not to hurt Ethan's self-esteem because of the financial support. So before getting my permission, Teacher Claire was scolded by Ethan pointing his finger at him. Ethan thought that I had deliberately asked the school to stop his scholarship in order to control him. Just after Teacher Claire explained it to me, Ethan walked into the office. He pointed at me righteously and said to Teacher Claire, I call you teacher out of respect for you. Have you thought it over? Are you going to give me the scholarship or not? Or have you been bribed by her and are determined to hurt your student? With my permission, Teacher Claire became much more assertive. He snorted angrily, what scholarship? It's all Wendy's financial support for you. What can I do if she doesn't want to support you anymore? After hearing this, Ethan was first shocked and then showed an expression as if he had understood something. You two have colluded to deceive me, right? I'm going to report you to the Education Bureau. Even though Teacher Claire had a good temper, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He took out a stack of materials about my donations from the drawer and threw them in front of Ethan. If you don't believe it, look for yourself. Your grades don't even qualify for the most basic scholarship. Besides, you receive 10,000 yuan a month. My salary isn't even that much. Besides, Wendy, who would give you so much money? I always thought that you were pretending to be confused while actually knowing everything. It turns out that you're really stupid. Do you really think you're a born genius? Teacher Claire had endured it for a whole day and finally burst out. Ethan looked at my every transfer record on the list in front of him, his face turned pale and he was speechless. He raised his head with difficulty and looked at me. Even so, you shouldn't have sent Stella to the detention center. She's your own sister. How is she supposed to face others in the future? I felt as if I had been struck by lightning and was completely stunned. I turned around and left. I couldn't help sighing that Ethan was really deeply in love with my sister. He couldn't even take care of himself, yet he still had the mind to worry about her. Before I had walked far, Ethan hurriedly chased after me and blocked my way. He didn't say a word for a long time. He held his head high, clenching his teeth tightly, looking as if he would rather die than give in. A good dog doesn't get in the way. After saying that, I walked around him and continued walking forward. He was a bit angry and rushed over again to argue with me. He accidentally slipped and fell straight in front of me. His handsome face was furrowed with pain, as if he was in great pain. A junior girl student rushed up with an infatuated look on her face, wanting to help him up. He scolded her harshly, and she covered her face and ran away crying. He then reluctantly stretched out his hand to me, as if the opportunity to help him up was something he was bestowing on me. I turned a blind eye. The corridor wasn't wide, and Ethan, who was over 1.8 meters tall, almost blocked the whole corridor when lying there. In Ethan's shocked eyes, I casually stepped over him and left. His angry and sad shout came from behind me, "Wendy, I'll never forgive you." "Neither will I," said in a low voice that only I could hear. In the following days, Ethan still lived a carefree life. He often treated others to meals, of course, without including me. This made the classmates praise him one after another. "Brother Ethan is really nice." Some even came to me to stand up for him. "Wendy, Brother Ethan doesn't care about your stinking money at all. He's living a better life without you." "Oh, really?" I looked at Ethan, who had been complacent before, with an amused expression. He hurriedly pulled his sleeves together and covered his collar a bit, looking extremely guilty. "You've sold your watch and your necklace. I wonder what else you can sell next." Within 2 days, Ethan had sold everything he could. When his buddies asked him what to eat that day, he hesitated and looked at me with a conflicted expression. After school, as expected, he made an excuse and left his buddies behind, following me instead. When there were fewer people around, he caught up with me. "Wendy," Ethan paused for a moment. "I apologize to you." After saying this, his face was full of pain, as if this light sentence had brought him great harm. I looked at him coldly as he put on this show. "Ethan, who do you think you are? Is your face that important?" Ethan became angry out of embarrassment and stopped pretending to be the tragic hero. "You stopped my card just to force me to compromise. Using such despicable means, how noble are you?" I was too lazy to pay attention to him and turned around to leave. Ethan grabbed me and sighed. "Wendy, I'll give you one last chance. If you let Stella out, I'll pretend that nothing happened and we'll be okay again." His tone made it seem like he was making a huge concession. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he thought I was jealous of Stella. "Stella has suffered so much. You shouldn't treat her like this." "I just regard her as my sister. Don't worry. I'll marry you as long as you let her out." I impatiently shook him off. Ethan was extremely puzzled. "What else do you want?" I looked at the 2 greedy and excited faces at the school gate and said to Ethan, "Stop pestering me. Your Stella has already been released." Just as I walked out of the school gate, a group of reporters swarmed over. "Miss Wendy, you've inherited your adoptive father's tens of billions of property. Why are you unwilling to support your biological mother and sister? Miss Wendy, how could you remain indifferent when seeing your mother and sister living on the streets?" I ignored the reporters' sharp questions and directly looked at Fiona and Stella behind them. The reporters' eyes also followed mine and looked back. Fiona and Stella immediately lowered their heads and put away the arrogant and complacent expressions on their faces. When they raised their heads again, they put on a pitiful look as if they had experienced all the vicissitudes of life. She looked at me and said sadly, "If it weren't for being unable to survive, Mom would never have asked the reporters for help. Please, give Mom a way to live, okay? Can we talk alone?" I said. Before Fiona could respond, the reporters objected. "Miss Wendy, if you have something to say, just say it here. After we leave, who knows how you'll bully your mother." "Exactly." I looked at Fiona without saying a word. Didn't she create such a big fuss just to negotiate with me? Sure enough, She appeased the reporters, saying that she would just have a private word with me aside and asked them to rest assured. Fiona led Stella over and got straight to the point. I want you to give Stella the recommended place at Harvard. I pretended to be surprised, such a place can't be transferred. Hearing what I said, Fiona thought that her trick of using the reporters to force me to compromise had worked and exchanged a knowing smile with Stella. Then she looked at me as if I were a fool. All that reading has been wasted. You look exactly like Stella. Just let Stella replace you and go instead. I pretended to be surprised again, but Stella doesn't know anything. She won't be able to get a diploma even if she goes. Stella didn't like it when she heard this. If you, a fool, can do it, why can't I? Fortunately, Fiona still had some sense left. She interrupted Stella and said to me, usually, Stella will go to class. If she doesn't learn well, you'll go and take the exams for her when it's time for the exams. Speaking of this, Fiona's face became serious and she warned me sternly, starting from tomorrow, you'll have to live as Stella. You're not allowed to tell others that you're Wendy anymore. My voice suddenly softened. Mom, I'm also your daughter. Why do you want to take everything from me and give it to Stella? Fiona was stunned for a moment. Obviously, she didn't expect that I would suddenly ask this question. However, this didn't arouse her motherly love. She took it for granted and told me, I gave you your life. Everything you have belongs to me. Naturally, I have the right to decide who these things should go to. You've enjoyed it for so many years. Isn't that enough? After saying this, she seemed to think it wasn't enough. For the rest of your life, you'll atone for the sufferings that Stella and I have endured. Stella nodded heavily to show her approval. It was about time. I pressed the record save button. I borrowed a microphone from a reporter and started playing the recording at the maximum volume on a loop. The more the people listened, the uglier their expressions became. Fiona wanted to reach out and grab it. If you dare to touch me, I'll call the police. The mother and daughter who had just been released didn't dare to make a move after my warning. Stella was still young after all, and her face blushed with shame. Fiona ignored everything and lay on the ground, throwing a tantrum and scolding me for being unfilial. If things had developed to this point, she might still be able to bear it. But what happened next would surely make her wish she could run away in a hurry. I couldn't help but snort coldly. Fiona, how could you bring yourself to kill your own biological daughter? Everyone present gasped when they heard me say this. Fiona's eyes widened even more as she looked at me in horror. Suddenly someone held up their mobile phone and shouted, look at the news. Wendy is so pitiful. Those were the truths about my getting lost back then that I had collected in the past few days. I had just spent a large amount of money to put these evidences on the news headlines. In the news video it was Fiona's former best friend. She was seriously telling the tragic story of my life. She said that not long after Fiona gave birth to me and Stella, my biological father Leo had an affair and ran away with a young woman. She accompanied my mother to chase after them to the city. Fiona was holding me and Stella begging Leo not to leave bitterly, but Leo was unmoved. Fiona was so angry that she threw me into Leo's arms and said that if he wanted a divorce each of them could take one child. Of course Leo didn't want to. He put me on the ground and turned around to leave. Fiona shouted at Leo's back, this unwanted one might as well die. Leo quickened his pace of leaving and Fiona picked me up from the ground and threw me into the nearby lake in a fit of pique and then left. Fortunately I was lucky and was rescued by my adoptive father who happened to pass by. After watching the video the reporters all condemned Fiona, she's your own biological daughter. How could you do that? Fiona, who had been lying on the ground throwing a tantrum, stopped her performance. There wasn't a trace of regret on her face. She stuck her neck out and said with great reluctance, Wendy's life was given by me. I can let her live if I want to, and I can let her die if I want to. As soon as these words came out the whole place was in an uproar. The reporters finally understood what kind of vicious woman they had been helping. Under the public condemnation Fiona finally couldn't hold on and fled in a hurry with Stella. I was just about to leave when Ethan blocked my way again. I frowned tightly. This was really endless bad luck. Wendy, Ethan seemed a bit at a loss. I didn't know your life story was so tragic. I thought. Well, never mind. Don't worry. I'll treat you well from now on. Also, what your mother did was indeed wrong, but after all, she's your mother. And your sister is innocent too. You really hurt their feelings today. In the next few days, I'll take good care of them for you. When you've calmed down, we can have a family reunion. Ethan closed his eyes, looking as if he was deeply pained on my behalf. He seemed to have completely forgotten that I had proposed breaking up. The driver had been waiting by the roadside for a long time. I walked around Ethan, who was still putting on a show, and got into the car. In the rearview mirror, Ethan opened his eyes and found that I was gone. He was so angry that he stamped his feet repeatedly. During the break the next day, Ethan came up to me as if nothing had happened and stretched out his hand. Give it to me. I was confused. Give you what? Aunt Fiona and Stella's living expenses. Didn't I promise to take care of them for you? Seeing that I didn't say anything, Ethan spoke again. You know, my place is small and can't accommodate so many people. Where do you think I should buy a house? I'll take Aunt Fiona and Stella to live there. I carefully examined Ethan's face. He didn't seem to be joking at all. Ethan, are you crazy? Why should I buy a house just because you guys have no place to live? You. Ethan had to suppress his anger since he was asking for something from me. Wendy, they're your biological mother and sister. Do you have to force them to death? You live in such a big villa. I'm just asking you to buy a small house. Is it that difficult? I was so angry that I laughed. But you said that house was for you. Even if I want to give my mother a place to live, why should the house be in your name? I've already said that I'll marry you. Won't my house be yours? If it's in your mother's name, she'll definitely leave the house to your sister, Ethan said indignantly. But don't you like my sister very much? Nonsense. I'm nice to her just because of you. It's just love me, love my dog. Oh, in my previous life Ethan also used this kind of excuse to deceive me. I regarded him as family and gave him 100% trust. I had never suspected anything between him and my sister. Only in this life did I see clearly that Ethan had always thought that I was way above him, which seriously hurt his self-esteem. Coincidentally, Stella's appearance gave him a chance to play the hero and aroused his desire to protect. Only by constantly hurting me, suppressing me, and forcing me to compromise for Stella's sake could he find a balance in the huge gap between him and me and maintain his ridiculous self-esteem. Ethan, I said calmly. He listened attentively and a greedy glint flashed in his eyes. I said, I won't give a penny of my money to Fiona, Stella, or you. After saying that, I packed my things and prepared to leave school. Since I had already been recommended to college, it didn't matter whether I attended classes or not. Moreover, the key moment from my previous life was coming and I had to ensure my own safety. Ethan was stunned at first and then he shouted at my back, Wendy, why are you so stingy? I've already said that there's nothing between me and Stella. I'm just helping you take care of her. All that responded to him was the cold air. As soon as I got home I received an apology text message from Stella. Sister, Mom and I have thought about it. It's our fault. We sincerely want to apologize to you. We're staying at the Maya Hotel. Could you come here? After all, we're still a family related by blood. Mom doesn't want to see you alone and helpless. In my previous life I forgave her without any precautions, which led to such a tragic ending. In this life I immediately started packing my things and went to the Maldives without telling anyone. I fully enjoyed the sunshine, the sea, and the beach. The messages from Fiona and Stella gradually changed from pleadings to threats, curses, and intimidations. Where on earth are you hiding? Do you really not care about the lives of me and your sister? You'll be despised by everyone. We don't even have enough to eat. Ethan's shabby house leaks, and I'm freezing to death. His mother forces us to pay living expenses every day. Otherwise, she'll drive me and your sister out. How could you find such a poor boyfriend? I ignored them and then received another message from Stella. Sister, brother Ethan hates bad women the most. You're so vicious. If brother Ethan doesn't want you one day, don't regret it. Say something. Avoiding it isn't a solution. I still ignored them and then received a message from Ethan. It was a photo. In the photo, Fiona was huddled on a shabby sofa covered with a thin, dirty blanket whose color couldn't be seen clearly. The dim light shone on her face and she was blowing on her hands because of the cold. By the way, it was winter there. Since Fiona said the house was drafty, no wonder she was so cold. On the small bed beside her, Stella also had a miserable look on her face, but she was better off than Fiona. She was wearing a patched floral padded jacket. The left side of her bed was slightly sunken. It was easy to guess who had just slept there. On the chat interface, Ethan had been typing for a long time after sending the photo. I quickly deleted him, afraid of being disgusted again. After blocking all the contact information of the three of them, I lay on the beach again, basking in the sun and comfortably drinking fruit juice. 4 months later, Harvard started. I arrived at the university entrance with simple luggage. Beside the school gate there was a huge pink flower arch. Many classmates were gathering around to take pictures. I also walked over curiously and found Ethan standing under the arch looking smart in his suit. I thought something was wrong and turned around to leave. "Wendy," Ethan called me. The onlookers had found the female lead and the place instantly became lively. They started to cheer and surrounded Ethan and me tightly, forming an impenetrable human wall. I had no choice but to turn around and face it. "Ethan, what's wrong with you?" Ethan chose to be deaf selectively. He knelt down on one knee with a deeply affectionate look on his face, took out a Tiffany diamond ring box, and handed it to me. Everyone present gasped. Ethan was extremely satisfied with everyone's reaction and couldn't hide his smugness. Then he opened the box. "Wow, what a big diamond ring. Oh my God. This girl is so lucky. Oh my God, such a big diamond ring. I wouldn't even dare to buy a fake one that big. Really, comparing people to others is so frustrating. I can't even imagine how happy it would be to have such a handsome and wealthy boyfriend." Ethan was praised to the skies by the girls around him and he became overconfident. "Marry me." Before I could respond, he said this while reaching out to grab my hand and put the ring on me. This scared me. I quickly pulled my hand away. "What are you thinking? A lousy glass bead, and you dare to use it as a diamond to propose?" I saw through it at a glance. Ethan became angry out of embarrassment. "What nonsense are you talking about? This is a limited edition diamond ring from Tiffany. I love you so much. It's okay if you've changed your heart, but how can you slander me like this?" I rolled my eyes and couldn't be bothered to argue with him. I reached out, snatched the diamond ring from his hand, and threw it on the ground. Accompanied by Ethan's screams, I gently stepped on the diamond ring with my little foot. When I lifted my foot, the diamond ring on the ground had been smashed to pieces. There were boos all around. Cut. I thought it was some rich second generation making a high-profile love confession. Unexpectedly, it's just a pauper trying to get something for nothing. He looks decent. Sure enough, you can't judge a book by its cover. Fortunately, this classmate knows the real thing. Otherwise, she might really think that happiness was knocking at the door. Doubts came one after another. Ethan slumped to his knees in defeat and hugged his head in pain. No, Stella clearly told me that this ring could pass for the real thing. At this time, a pregnant woman came running from a distance. She was unhealthily overweight, and her flabby flesh jiggled as she ran. It was only when she got closer that I realized she was my sister, and she was coming straight at me. She pointed at me with one finger and started shouting abuse. "What right do you have to reject brother Ethan? So what if the ring is fake? These flowers are real. Do you know how much they cost? Pay me back the money quickly." Before she could get close to me, Ethan kicked her to the ground without hesitation. "It's all because of you, you bitch. If it weren't for you showing up out of nowhere, how could Wendy reject me? How could I have lived such a poor and miserable life with you? The classmates all discriminate against me, and I don't even dare to go to school." Ethan pointed at the ring on the ground and shouted abuse at Stella. "Didn't you say she wouldn't be able to tell? It's all your fault. I'll beat you to death today, you bitch." Ethan kicked Stella again and again, completely ignoring her pleas and cries. I didn't want to watch them fight like dogs, so I turned around and left. Later, I heard that Stella was bleeding and probably lost the baby. Ethan was so frightened that he was at a loss beside her. Someone at the scene called an ambulance for them. After that, there was no news of them. I thought this farce had come to an end. However, a few months later, some unknown large expenses on the bill caught my attention. I checked the surveillance cameras in the shopping malls in second- and third-tier cities where my company was located. It was Stella, who had lost weight after the miscarriage and took advantage of looking similar to me, along with Fiona and Ethan, who were cheating people under false pretenses. Pretending to be me, they went to inspect the shopping malls and took whatever they liked directly. The money grew like a snowball and finally caught my attention. Before that, they had been living a carefree life for quite a long time. I resolutely chose to call the police. When the police arrived with me, they were spending the money they had cheated from my shopping malls and enjoying themselves in a 5-star seaside hotel. The police burst in. Fiona was so startled that she sat up suddenly, and the petals on her face fell off, revealing her ugly old face. Stella stared at me with resentment all over her face. "What are you doing here? Haven't you made us suffer enough?" I pointed at the luxurious facilities in the hotel and couldn't help laughing. "You call this suffering?" Stella said firmly, "I got all these by my own ability." "It's none of your business." Fiona began wailing, "What a sin. Although the family is so wealthy, I was driven out of the house by my own biological daughter. Woo-woo. It's really against the will of heaven." I raised my eyebrows. "I'm not in the same household registration book with you." Fiona got angry. "I gave birth to you. The blood relationship is something that you can never erase in your life. Just shut up." The police arrested Fiona and her daughter on charges of grand theft. The two of them were dragged out, cursing and swearing. I knew there was one more. The wardrobe door was slightly open, and I found Ethan trembling inside. He forced an ugly smile at me. "Wendy, Stella has been arrested. I'll belong to you alone from now on. Uncle Policeman, there's one more here." I watched the backs of the 3 people being taken away and showed a relieved smile. I gently waved to them. "Goodbye. Oh, no, farewell forever." The end.